better picture of it, quite honestly.
What I'm looking at is that there was a Senate bill in March that put this potash on their critical mineral list, which is very convenient when you deal with anybody. When you assume any type of corruption, you've always got to assume the government. And then it looks like my past senator Sherrod Brown was one of the people that authored this bill, and he's corrupt as they come. He smiles real pretty, but he's corrupt.
Well, the end
so
game
it's
with potash is going to be fertilizer, but the point being is that what I'm looking at right now is just pure and simple the fact that they're pilfering their natural resources. And so the next step would be like, who's the other companies that they're going to be selling to, and what are the connections to our politicians?
I'm sure there are, because it says
I'm
that we import
absolutely.
95%. We import 95% of the potash. So that's how they probably got the bill through. So there's gonna be, every time, anytime, um, we find a little bit of corruption somewhere, it seems like our government is always attached to that. It says by adding phosphate and potash to the critical mineral resource, we can take a significant stride to securing our own future and sending a clear message. I just think so. We use this for obviously our food supply, correct?
Well, it's fertilizer. You use
Right.
potash
So
and fertilizer and such. I believe that it goes into other products too. It could go into, well, let me look up just so I'm accurate here, because I can make a educated guess on the other industries that use it. But let's just go ahead and look it up. And
I'd
so
like to
this
what the other six counties, what other counties it is, and also I would like uh, to have record of their meetings, because I'll bet you anything their meetings are almost identical to the meeting that you just displayed, doing the same thing. So I think we're going to see a very uh, uh, movement uh, of whatever it is that they are doing. They're probably doing it in all six counties at the same time. It's all going to go up at the same time. Bam.
okay, so potash is the main ingredient in most fertilizers, which contains a mixture of phosphates, nitrogen, and potassium. The term potash refers to potassium-rich minerals that are used in agriculture. Potassium in these salts is known as a regulator, since it can influence more than 60 enzymes that control the quality of crops. Over 90 million tons of potash is mixed worldwide. Well, that's not exactly what I'm looking for, because although this is helpful, so we're talking, fertilizer is a chip shot, but I think it's also in other things. And let's see, it's also used in snow melt, aluminum recycling, metal electroplating, can be used as a water softener. Potassium carbonate is used in producing textiles, photographic chemicals, fire extinguishers, and animal feed supplements. Combined with silica sand to form water glass is known as potassium silicate. Water glass is used for arc welding, electrodes, and potassium hydroxide is used in soap making and in industrial water treatment. So
and
it's got
this
a
is
lot of
okay.
uses.
So you're telling me, and this is just my cause for concern, as being, just learning about this company. So the fertilizer we use to grow our food is also used in snow removal and all the, because um that sounds pretty disgusting, actually.
Well, and just because something is used for different things doesn't mean it's disgusting. Potash has been around for a long time, and so I mean, this isn't like a compound that we should really actually be afraid of. It just is. So
Right.
I'm not particularly concerned with it. Just like nitrogen, you can use nitrogen in snow melt too. You can use it in a lot of different things. I mean, we throw it on the ground because it's a great fertilizer, but and it just is. I mean, if you plant beans first, beans will fix nitrogen in the soil, And then, so let's just say you rotate your crops out and you plant beans, and then you go to corn. The nitrogen that the beans fix in the ground helps the corn. So just because potash is used for different materials doesn't mean it's toxic or bad. It just is.
Okay.
It's naturally occurring. So it just has multiple uses. How's that for description?
That's okay. That clears it up for me. And this is mined, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it actually can be created too. So, but when I looked at this, this is kind of interesting. Let's look down on this into a private potash operation. There we go. So, and this could actually be something too, that there's something else they're after that we don't know.
You got bad service, Donna.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure they're probably trying to knock this out a little bit. So they're talking about fertilizer prices. 7,000 feet underground, a massive mineral deposit left behind by ancient evaporated seas could be the key to a new billion-dollar industry. So I think the potash comes from burning to potassium ore deposit that stretches underneath. So I don't think that they're let's see, deposit contains salt and potassium chloride, commonly called potash, critical and increasing cost components of fertilizer, commonly called potash. So there you go.
They just got awarded a new contract.
Who did?
Let's see, I'm reading it now. So it says EPC contractor for Vilta project is a significant milestone. They just awarded it's on that on their website, that potash company that you're just speaking of.
Yeah. So I think that this is but what it certainly is public-private partnership. It's going through, when they mention Eagle, which is the DNR, which has been clear-cutting the state of Michigan. They've been responsible for managing that and keeping people out of those areas so they can clear cut and pilfer our resources. That's really what's going on here. So
maybe trees are knocked down.
Yeah, they just clear cut it, because when I was up there, the stumps, the uneven ground, they're not finishing it off. If a contractor that was not in bed with them was doing this sort of nonsense, the DNR they would come down on a company that was not being protected by them like there's no tomorrow. They wouldn't allow this type of behavior. So whoever's in bed with them on these clear cutting operations is probably also being protected by them. And they're doing it absolutely wrong. I want to know what the receipts are. I want to know what they're doing with both the minerals as well as the logging rights that they've taken, because something's going on here and it's not okay.
Well, you know where I would look first, Miss Donna? I would look at the senators that put this this new bill through to make it a critical mineral on the critical mineral list. Because if something goes on, any type of shortage, which obviously if it's on this list, then it is, then you've always got hands into it. And it's Sherrod Brown, Tillis, Baldwin, Marshall, Pete Ricketts, and Rick Scott. So this is all on their website.
Yeah, this was introduced by Senator John Bumstead. There's a little concern with this, and presented to the governor. So I've got the bill pulled up here. Hang on, let's look at this. So here we go. This is a Public Act to become law. Sponsors were Roger Victory, Ed McBroom, Jim Runstead, Kevin Daly, Michael McDonald, and John Bumstead. So I know Jim and think he's a decent guy. Supplemental water supply quality and standards. So it was drinking water and water infrastructure improvements supplemental. It's an appropriations act. So there you go.
I'd start with those guys.
Well, I could ask Jim what's going on with this and be really concerned about it because I am a little concerned about what I'm seeing, and the fact that they were that's connected with the. So let me go back here a minute. Let me go back one, and we'll go back into the fact that it is connected
They
to
got
this.
a $225 million bond in September of 22.
Yep. So there you go. Interesting. Well, it's something to look into a little further, I guess.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah. So, and a little concerned. This is interesting. Usually I have another screen up here that has lots of people following it, and it's at 0 right now. So I don't know what's going on. So could be that the 9/11 thing that's coming on is going to, morning, Melissa. How you doing?
Morning. You said you don't know what's happening. I'm just going to jump in. Last night I was on TikTok
Yeah.
and some other platforms looking for specific search terms and that I know were out there. Nothing is coming up. Nothing.
What
It's
search
like
terms were you looking for?
that they were gonna. They started that thing. They progressed from they're gonna attack in Aqua Tofana conservative men to now they're going to start attacking and dog walking Southern women.
Oh, wow.
What are you talking about? So
That's
bad.
that liberal shit,
Uh-huh.
Donna, that we've been investigating for like a week now.
Okay. So what? Let's go back and like put that out there.
Okay, so I'll start. You finish, Melissa.
Okay.
So once Donald Trump became president elect, the liberal women, well, first they started by shaving their hair, their head. Now y'all look like fucking skinheads. Let's just start there. And then they started openly saying they were going to commit homicide using a drug that was made in the 1630s. It's a poison. It's called aqua tofana. That they were going to slip this in conservative men's drinks unknowingly. And keep in mind, these people hold positions in our community, and they were going to kill them that way. And it's a whole 4B movement. It's attached to that. It started when Nick, what is it, Flutes said that your body, my choice. One man said this, and they all took off running. I reported on it on my TikTok channel a couple a couple days ago, and now I don't know what Melissa's found out since then. I've been searching for like deaths that are conservative deaths that haven't are not explained yet, because I don't know if they realize this. Our advancements in just our testing, our scientific testing, as far as the blood and the coroner and that type of shit, I'm sure they're, if they can't test for the actual poison, I'm sure it will have some kind of elevated levels within your body of something. They're going to be able to find it. So why don't you pick up from there, Melissa? Because I don't know what you were talking about. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, so I'll have to find some of that in a bit. So after they threatened the men with aqua tofana, I think we could see that all of the men's women got on there and they're like, "Oh no, you're not, honey." Like, and it caused a great divide, right? So what I'm seeing is once they made these, those actions that Christina is talking about, I watched a shift, and so now you have the lesbian women, you have the straight liberal, Kamala men are saying, yeah, screw y'all, you're crazy. So I guess we're switching sides now. So now I guess that's lit them up. And now in response, the crazy, the crazies on the left are saying instead of Aqua Tofana, I guess now they're going to start attacking Southern women. They're going
I
to
wish your
start,
bitch would.
and they said they are going to dog walk Southern women
Listen,
specifically.
ain't
And so,
nobody dog walking me.
but back to the point, they're exactly. I mean, they don't know what they're doing. Most of us in the South, we're Gen X and we're going through menopause right now, so they're just going to scratch that itch for us.
So did they discuss this murder plot on social media?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So why isn't this
I
being
already turned it into the FBI.
you and I
Nothing.
same thing at the same time?
TikTok is allowing it to go on. I turned it into TikTok legal.
The FBI should have their phone records, their text record, everything, and they should be investigated. Unless, of course, I don't know, something crazy like they don't care or they're in on it. I don't know.
They
I don't know.
probably don't take it seriously, which is what you find a lot that comes on TikTok.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had.
They take it very seriously, depending
Oh
on
well,
what
they ain't doing nothing as far as I know of.
you say. One thing that's sensitive, they're going to go after you if you're on the wrong political side.
Right.
So, yeah, that's
Well, I'm kind of wondering though, there's all this conjecture going around, and I have to believe that the good guys are in control. That there's a lot of bad guys out there, but the good guys are in control. And with that said, if I were going to plan something out to actually take down a global crime syndicate, I think that what you would do is let them commit the crimes and then document it all. And then when you're going to take them down, get them all at one time, or pick off the higher ones first and then the lowest ones and start squeezing the ones in the middle, because that's probably where the majority of the bad guys really are, or people that are complicit. So
Yeah, I got all their names. I've been recording it for a better part of since Trump got in. It started as soon as that Nick Flutes guy, who is an openly Nazi, as he says himself.
you got a link on him so that I can you put that in the private chat so we can see who this guy
I
is?
can't do that. Melissa may be able to.
Yeah, I'll work on
Nick.
Yeah.
Nick Flutes, remember I told you that story, Donna, about when we was at the People's Convention? I think it was in Detroit.
Yeah.
And me and Josh and them came out. That was the guy that was across the street that Charlie Kirk wouldn't let in.
Oh yeah, because I wanted to go out and talk to him. I was like,
Yeah.
hey, I want to go talk to this dude and see if we
I
can
went to the
get the
crowd.
crazy out of him. I should have just gone over there and walked up and shook his hand.
I did go over there, and his little flunkies, which are all young children, men, not women, they followed me around and tried to push me out. It was
Really?
crazy. I got tons of footage on it.
Did they put their hands on you or not?
No, they all surrounded me and then started walking me towards the edge of the sidewalk.
Really?
And I told them, you better back up, motherfucker, because you're fucking with the wrong one. We'll rumble right here in the middle of friggin' Detroit, grown men or not. So he got a lot of attention when he started speaking out, because he was saying things that made sense to young conservative men. But then he went all fucking alt-right with it. And just, now there's footage of him on the internet. He maced some woman that came to his door, which I'm sure a lot of people are coming to his door right now. But he maced this female. I'm not going to say that she didn't deserve to be maced, or that, that's not my opinion to make. But I think he's in a little bit of hiding right now, to be honest.
Yeah, he needs to be. So what did I jump in? What were y'all talking about before I got on? I didn't catch that.
We were talking about Michigan Potash and Salt Company and Eagle, which they in Oscoda were playing a video on the big thing right now in Michigan is the fact that FEMA is contracting, or alleged to contract, to dump 300 and some odd semis on the ground at an air base in Oscoda. Now, something that I found out that's underneath this is really interesting, because, can't take things at face value. The guy that apparently owns that abandoned airfield up there, which I don't really get it, and I think we need to look into this some more, was actually given the air base by an agency. That's what one of my whistleblowers told me, and we have to look into this a little bit more to see if it's true. But that this has been a long time in coming, and it wasn't just a right away thing. And the other thing is that all the counties that they are saying they're there to protect are at least an hour and a half away from this air base. So I'm like, what? Let me put it in here and I'll show you. I'll get a map up so you can see.
That's
Okay,
why I was calling you this morning, Melissa. I wanted you to look at the Google Maps on that on the airbase she's talking about.
So I don't know if this is the person that if it's actually an air base or if it's decommissioned. So let me see if we can get. So hang on, you're going to see what I'm going to look at here on the fly. Wirt Smith Air Force Base is a decommissioned United States Air Force base in Osco County. Hang on a second. So there's a lot of misinformation going on here. Let's see. We've got Paul Wirt Smith, commander of the SAC's 8th Air Force, was killed when his B-25 Mitchell bomber crashed on Cold Mountain near Asheville, North Carolina in 46. Wow, that's kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, I seen that this morning. You know, Miss Donna, just real quick, when we're talking about other things, your service is great. But as soon as you go back talking about that potash company, it starts to break up.
Yeah, potash, Michigan Potash and Salt Company. I think we're over the target here on this, guys. I really do. So now I'm going to show you where Escoda is. And for a person who's in Michigan, I'm calling bullshit to this because I don't know what's going on here, but it's probably not what they're portraying it by. Okay. So here I am over here in the Grand Rapids area. Da-da. Here is the air base up here, and the counties that they were talking about are in direct line in this direct line across here, almost completely like in a straight line from Racine, right? Now, what I can tell you in Michigan is that the largest human trafficking pipeline in the state right now is right here down 94 into Detroit, across the bridge, and out into Canada. They're also dumping them off. It's easy to dump them off, and just so that everybody knows, most people come to Michigan for the first time, go out to the Great Lakes and go, whoa, I can't see across the other side. They think this is going to be something they're going to look out and see Wisconsin, right? You do not see Wisconsin. You do not see Canada. You do not see across the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan at any rate. There are portions where you can see across it, like Port Huron over here and Detroit into Windsor. So, but generally, if you're along the coastline from here, you ain't seeing nothing out there but water. Okay, this is all water. You're gonna see water. You're not even gonna really see the islands much there, but you're certainly not going to see this shore over here. It is incredibly easy to dump off into Lake Michigan and completely be lost off the radar. When I was traveling around for governor, what I saw up here in the Alpena area, as well as Sheboygan. So here's Sheboygan, Alpena's over here. So let's zoom in on this. And I said something to the people that I know that actually have the ability to, in fact, say things, is this whole area here has got some really, really weird watercraft in it. And I started looking up the watercraft because that's what I do. I don't believe anything that somebody tells me ever. And I mean ever. When I started looking this stuff up here, the watercraft that was out there, they were doing weekly cruises on the Great Lakes at like $8,000 on up a person. I'm going to tell you right now, that is a lot of money for a week's cruise on the Lake.
Did you say 8,000
per person?
$8,000?
Yes, and I want you to think about this. The only time you're traveling on the Great Lakes really for recreation is about 3 months out of the summer, because it's damn cold here. It's cold and the waters are treacherous. That's why the Edmund Fitzgerald went down. And when Gordon Lightfoot put out the songs that, you know, the islands and bays are for sportsmen, he wasn't kidding. Okay. There's people that die on Lake Michigan every single year because they don't have respect for the water. We have riptides here. They'll go out on the ice in the winter and the ice will shift and they'll go down. They'll dive off the piers. I mean, these are sort of stupid people that do this, that aren't from the area, that don't have respect for it. But I want you to look at this. When we talk about the islands down in the Caribbean, check this out. Within probably less than on high speed, you're going to be able to cross this border. There is no border control there whatsoever. I'm just telling you that. And you're from Michigan into Canada, bing, 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 real quick. And
So
then
I wonder.
all kinds of islands here. So if you think that Epstein Island was the only one, they're just like waking all y'all up. This thing is loaded with islands. And when you get down into this area here by Mitchell's Bay and such, you're looking at this. Let's go in here. And the kids that have disappeared and have the kids in the Detroit area in the 70s that disappeared and was connected to Fox Island, up by Leelanau. I hope you understand the complexity of the geography here. If you don't, I will spend a little more time educating all y'all on it. But look at the complexity.
Oh, listen, so you got a bunch of kids. So you got in May of 2023, 25 kids just ended up missing in
Yes.
Detroit. I mean, there's tons of news stories on it. How did
Not only that, but if you go back to my research at the border and the conversations that I had when finding out their next stop was the
was Miss
American Islam College in Chicago.
Right.
And remember Greg Switzer? He was running for HD 44 out here in Texas.
Yep.
He retired Lieutenant Marine Colonel. He looked into it and he said this goes into, from what he's hearing, that when they leave, when those that they want to traffic leave the Chicago area, they're being moved up to the Great Lakes region, he said, and they were reporting that the people were never being seen again.
I would say that that's very possible because you remember when Hillary and Huma Abedin had there was a funeral home that they found a whole bunch of fetuses and such in the attic there in the Detroit area. Specifically, I believe it was in the Dearborn area, which is a Muslim community. I'm going to tell you what, I am fundamentally concerned about what I am seeing here and the connections. And I'm just going to say right now that when we start looking at things that seem to be the direction that the mainstream media narrative wants us to go, step just a little bit off to the left or just a bit off to the right. And I don't mean politically, I'm saying take a step off center. And that's probably where we should be looking, because I think we're going to find some incredible things. Why did they all of a sudden come up with this FEMA, confused FEMA information on an air base that doesn't even remotely would be stupid for protecting those counties?
It's not a prone area.
My fucking laptop just crashed. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, why would they do that up in Oscoda? Because it's at least an hour and a half away from those areas that they're saying they're setting up for disaster to be able to protect. It does not make sense.
That's a red flag.
It's a big red flag. And so I'm not really buying this at all. So my question is that we need to look into it, because there may be some connections there that are closer to what they're trying to hide. Okay. And I can tell you right now that the target for what's coming across that border, not only is it going across the United States, it's going into Michigan, because we can make all kinds of kids disappear in Michigan without a trace. And I'm not going to say we, as I'm involved in it, because I'm not. But the state of Michigan and the powers that be here can make people disappear so quickly, it would scare you. And when you've got an international port right here, let's check out with this, because honestly, we've got a geopolitical cluster going on here in Michigan. Let's run down here to where we connect to Windsor. Here, let's look down here a minute. So we've got, here's a border right here. We've got the way we go right across here into Windsor, here, Detroit. And we've got the international port here in Detroit. You have got a real problem in making people accessible to cross the border, and absolutely disappear them. And what's happening with the container traffic here? Remember when they found that container in our base in LA, and they found just tons of human remains in it. A lot of them fetuses, a lot of them kids. And the guys that found that out in the LA port, well, remember what President Trump, the greatest president in the history of the United States of America, did? He stopped that port from having two international powers in control of that port, which was brilliant on his part. But what's happening in Michigan here, I know that there was someone, because I know that there was someone at a party, because I know the people around it a couple of years ago. And this gal disappeared from this party, and they tracked her cell phone to one of those containers.
Let me ask you a question, Miss Donna.
They called
Where
the police.
is
Hang on a minute. They called the police. The police refused to break that container open, even though the cell phone was there, and they found her body dead on a beach on a beach in Africa 2 weeks later.
that was that case?
That was the case. And
Oh
I
my
know
gosh.
the people that are around it. So when you go look back at Fox Island in the 70s and what they did with kids in Fox Island, and there's a connection there between Detroit and Fox Island. Here, let's go out on this. I'll show you where that is too, because this is how they're doing it. Most of the islands around Michigan have got an airstrip on it. Now let's go back to this. Let's look at the airstrip that they've got there, and that they're wanting to put here, that they've got an airfield there. Look at where Grayling was, which I went to Grayling. There was no military on Grayling. It was all Eagle, the DNR, and DK security, which I found satellite offices for DK in weird spots across the United States. They've got about 35 of them. So
Well,
why?
I know that we know that there has to, I mean, there's something going on up at the Grayling, because we've been watching for days with the helicopters leaving from there. Those are military helicopters.
Yeah. So let's jump in here to Fox Island. See if I can find
Where
it.
is Vancouver, in the port of Vancouver, in reference to this lake right here? Because I just seen a story, and actually TikTok violated me for it, which was real weird because there's tons of other stories on there. A lady was jogging, and she stopped, and she turned around and started, and this was just a few days ago, like 2 days ago. She turned
You see
around
it?
and yeah, I see it. Okay. So she turned around and she started screaming that that there is human trafficking in those containers on the port of Vancouver. And then their authorities came out, and I guess they did find some.
Yeah, this is the crux of it right here. So where are they going with these kids? They're farming us.
Yeah, they're farming us.
So let's go up here. So now we've got Grayling right there. There's Grayling. We're straight across from Traverse City, and I can tell you what I found in Traverse City. So we got to go over here, because this is the area they're clear cutting right there. They're clear cutting it. You can see it from a satellite map. And look at this. Da-da-da-da-da. My. And guess what? Next to Petoskey, let's go up here, because what I saw in Petoskey up here, Bay Harbor, this is another thing that I got to tell you. It was crazy, because I ended up running face to face with the global nest of globalists up there next to Petoskey, or in Petoskey, because there's another place up there. See, this is the great thing about spooking around on the ground. All right. You get to actually see what the heck's going on up there. And there's some China connections up here. And, I don't know, let's say Boyne and Charlevoix. So if you go up here to Petoskey, and you have a really nice time up here because it's real pretty, and you get over here to Bayshore. And I was told, we got to have a casino up there, because we got to have a place to launder our money. And you got Bear Creek Plaza, which anytime you see Bear Creek, I want to tell everybody, raise your awareness. Your spidey senses should be kicking in, okay? So I'm up here in Bay Harbor. We just we were driving around, like, what the heck is that? I didn't even know it was there. And we went down there, and there was a guy there that basically said to me, "Oh, we really hate Tudor Dixon. I'm in with the DeVosses," and all his exact words were, "Every billionaire on the planet has got a place up in this area. We want to do a fundraiser for you because we really don't like Tudor Dixon, and we want to do a fundraiser." And took pictures and such. And I went next door, and Ron Weiser, the ex chairman of the Republican Party, has got a shop up there. And I went there and just in his face bought the most expensive glass of wine that he did, and flipped off the sign and took a picture. Well, I'll tell you what, they were watching me, which is exactly what I wanted them to do. And I provoked them. And within 5 minutes, the people I met up there said, "You will not be using our pictures. You will not be saying that you know us, an endorsement or anything like that." So automatically they realized, guess what? Brandenburg was not playing fucking ball with them. And it was like, but this is something that you need to know as going around, because I'm not buying this. And nobody out there should be buying this narrative at all. Not at all. They're getting us to look somewhere else while they are screwing us royally. Let me see if I can zoom in. See, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and show you all these little tiny islands that are up here around Beaver Island.
I got a question. Doesn't Ron Weiser participate in the Atlantic World Forum?
He's part of the Atlantic Council, and not only is he part of the Atlantic Council, he also was involved with Burisma Oil. And and he also made a donation, which nobody wants to talk about, to Biden. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why the Republican Party in the state of Michigan is so screwed up. They tried to clean the nest up, and guess what happened? The person that came up with the report for removing Christina Caramo, which there's good information, and she should have been gone because she was tied in with somebody else. Why is it that they're putting up people that look like they're opposed, but they have connections to China on the Caramo side, and I can prove that, and on the other side with Pete Hoekstra, who signed the Patriot Act, and oh goodness, how does that connect? Perhaps with the DeVosses and Amway, and perhaps the Dutch banking families. I think we need to be looking behind this. I'm going to put up Fox Island here, and then I have posted the nonsense. Let's see, Fox Island.
Wait a minute. I just looked up this Ron Weiser guy.
Yeah.
He was at the RNC, I think.
Of course he was. He was the chairman.
I have pictures of him.
Yeah, he's the chairman of the Republican Party in Michigan, or he was. So here we go. We have, let me see. Oh, we've got Fox Island here. We've got a little Fox Island. Ta-da. There's a little tiny Fox Island. And this is outside of Detroit. There's a Fox Island, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else here. Here we go. There is Fox Island. And oh my, look how significant this is. Look at all these islands. And there's a lot of Native American children remains that have been found on these islands. There's a reason why they're going after ethnic populations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has probably more to do with an ideology.
So this dude he's the one that donated the money for the Mike Pence's legal bills. I remember this. That were during the Mueller investigation. Yeah.
Well, and look at who all was look at what happened on the 7th of January. Guess who resigned as the education secretary of education?
Who? This guy?
Betsy DeVos.
Oh, okay. Okay, wait a minute. This guy's been in all kinds of stuff.
Yes. And Ukraine and Atlantic Council, and guess what? The Republican Party put him right in, and they did remove him, which is good. However, with that said, we have some issues.
Oh, he was the one the witches burn at the stake. I remember this. Okay, I know who you're talking about now. Yeah, this is all coming back to me now.
So yeah.
To the vice chair.
Let's see. I'm here, Donna. We lost wireless connections last night. AT&T claiming a power surge. They're going to take the power grid down. Just wait and see. Marco
I think it's going to happen before Trump gets put in.
I do too. Exposure to PFAS can have serious health effects in the air, water, and soil. And Marco said he understood Wordsmith to be contaminated with PFAS. Well, I think that's pretty much a chip shot here. So anyhow, yeah, kind of an interesting. Let's talk about Fox Island. It's a naturally formed island in Detroit River, southeast Michigan, in the late 1800s, used by Dunbar and Sullivan Company to store explosives for engineering projects in the Detroit River shipping channels. Serves as a picnic location and such. And the island is now privately owned. My.
Who owns it?
Well, let's go and look.
Sorry, I'm listening in. I'm getting ready to head to Austin.
Oh, you got that prayer thing with General Flynn?
No, we're going this morning with the legislators there, and we're going to be pushing some policy legislative ideas.
So Fox Island is owned by... Huh. I don't say.
Let me look, because I'm going to look for another one. Hang on a minute.
Should be a public record.
That's what I'm looking at now.
So here's another one that we need to look at here, because this is actually, that's important, but there's another one that I believe is more important. And this is the one that we need to be looking at. And it's up here off of all of this area where the globalists told me the billionaires have all of their point. It's off of Leelanau Peninsula. It's about 10 miles southwest of Beaver Island. 2 islands form an archipelago, and it is there's a airstrip there. And when you start looking into this, North Fox Island operational, grass airstrip accessible, and there was a connection there with some kids that disappeared. Yeah, criminal history, child pornography ring. So look at the one on the east side is fine, but this is the one I want you to look at, is the one up by Leelanau, because this is where the child porn ring was discovered operating out of North Fox Island, and the connection was to a bunch of kids and a bunch of kids that disappeared. And he fled the United States to to the Netherlands in 1976, which is something we need to be watching with the Dutch banking families, which is right next to Belgium and such, and the seat of money and power. And we could also be looking at the castle of the Dark Mother. And it's going to answer lots of questions.
That just made my stomach turn. I can't. Okay, looks like who owns Fox Island? It said some guy Johnson, David Johnson.
Is that the one in the south, or is that the one in the north?
It just said Fox Island. Hold on, he owned it, but he sold it back to the state of Michigan in ~94.
Look to the one that's up by Leelanau. That's the one we need to be looking at. So it was here. It is multiple. Oakland County child killer case. And the victims were held captive before killing, and 4 of the deaths triggered an investigation. And how it happened, it was really crazy. But when you look at that, where there's one, there's going to be more. And so, kind of an interesting thing. And the proximity here, the proximity between these areas and all the islands.
I see what you're looking at.
Private airstrips. And now look at our air bases up here, and they're telling us that they're protecting us from natural disasters here. I ain't buying it. We're talking, this is going to be at least an hour and a half to 2 hours away from what they say they're protecting. Who in their flipping right mind would stage something like that? I mean, I wouldn't hire any of these people if that's exactly the goal that they're doing, to manage a remote office, because they're lying their ever living behinds off. Something's going on here, and we need to investigate into this more. But the connection I see is the potash and salt company, and stealing of the resources by the powers that be behind Eagle and behind the Gretch the wretch here in the state of Michigan, and our unconstitutional government of tyranny, that all of them need to be tried for treason. Every single one of them has violated their oath of office. They've done terrible things to this state, and it's not just the governor. It's there all the way down, including the township boards who are in bed with them and stealing our land and allowing that to be funded, giving the land, just like Goshen was part of it. Now look at what they've gone after. Goshen, the air base, the potash company and such. This is all about stealing our nation and giving it to the globalist powers. If you're not pissed, there's something wrong with your head.
Yeah.
I can't find any. I think the state of Michigan owns these. Yeah. Yeah,
Makes
they own
sense.
it.
Makes sense. It's like DNR here. Eagle has commandeered 4.6 million acres. They own the mineral rights as well as the logging rights. And all they do is keep raising our taxes here. Why is it that Michigan is with every single one of us is a plus 85% tax rate in the state of Michigan when you look at the discretionary taxes and start lining them up?
I'll tell you why. Because you're paying for their infiltrating our state, our country.
You bet we are. And they're stealing our coffers. It's extortion. They've got a little extortion racket going on here. Money laundering. The state is probably one of the biggest money laundering operations in the entire world. All you got to do is look at it, follow the money, and you'll see all the players and how they're connected.
So quick question on so one thing I did here in Texas, you're talking about the money laundering and such. Now this was 2022. I started looking at the Texas campaign finance reports, and I had the question. It's like, okay, let's see where this money is going. And so I took all the payees that had like an LLC or Inc. or anything like that, and their payee name on the lines, extracted those out and started looking the companies up in the Texas State Comptroller, because in the state of Texas, you have to be in good standing, just like most states, with the comptroller to be able to transact business in the state. And a lot of the payees I found, especially on the Rhino and Blue side, the payees, after receiving millions of dollars, were not set up in the state of Texas to be able to transact business. So technically that could allegedly be tax evasion, right, on millions of dollars that's being funneled through these political campaigns. And so point being, I just wonder if you've looked at the same for Michigan that might help to identify some of the sketch players at the bottom who don't have all their ducks in a row, right? Because there's always going to be some.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Republican Party of Michigan is an absolute cluster. I'm just going to say that. Okay. They don't have anybody that's a good, strong leader. They're divided into three factions. And then they put up too many candidates, and the candidates are bad that they put up. Tudor Dixon was involved in the smurfing stuff, but they went ahead and did it because it was DeVos money that funded her. And DeVos pulled her funding as soon as she won the primary and left her because they all wanted it to stay the same with Whitmer. If you look at Tudor Dixon's campaign finance, she had a whole bunch of little $5 donations that were coming from where people? Arizona.
Act blue.
And so, but Arizona, but what they were doing is they were doing smurfing. Someone was doing smurfing, which is basically identity theft. And what they do is they donate under somebody else's name, small amounts, and hope nobody's looking at it. Like for me, when I started getting hit with my personal credit card through the red donation. I can't think of it right now, but they actually hit my credit card with between $500 and $2,000 donations to campaigns I'd never even heard of. They hacked it. And I called the campaigns up and said, you right now are involved in absolute fraud, and I would suggest you check your records. So I gave them a running start. But the reality was that they thought that the credit card they were using was a campaign one where nobody would look, because that's their MO, is to hit campaign finance and they think that nobody's going to be looking at it. Well, when it hit my personal credit card, it was absolutely easy for me to find, and I turned that in. And I'm like, you gotta look at what they're doing here. I said they literally charge between a bunch of transactions on candidates I never even heard of across the United States. It was crazy. So Act Blue, and then I can't believe I can't remember the name of the Republican side, but yeah, they're all doing the same thing. And the state of Michigan, the Republican Party in the state of Michigan, had better get their head out right now, because I don't know, I don't see a lot of real actual traction there to take care of business. And it's very concerning to me that I really think that they are dead center in front of it. Because why didn't they go after impeachment for Nessel, Whitmer, and Benson? Why have they done pretty much almost nothing except for a few low-level lawsuits, or taking things instead of taking it to the mat? Why are they just kind of dinking around out there? I don't know. But this also might be part of the setup to take it down. They may have a plan. I hope they have a plan.
They're all in club. That's why.
Yeah, they're all in the club.
They're in the club. Okay, guys. So I've got architect Richard Gage coming on here in a minute. And I love you people. I love you people so much. It's amazing how smart and amazing you are. And I'm so glad that we're friends and actually able to go through this. So we'll be seeing you guys on Monday at 10 o'clock again. And we're going to go beat this thing up a little bit until we get the actual truth out on everything. 30 seconds. Any 30 seconds for Chris, Melissa, and Christina.
I'll just
Well, I think that first of all, that airstrip needs to be looked at. When ABC jumps in and says that's not true, that's not going on, and when are we going to listen to the media? You don't trust the media. When they start telling you to look left, you better look right. So I think cool on that airbase to find out exactly what's going on, because I don't believe anything that I'm seeing on there, but the fact that they raised it means.
Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, Melissa, your turn.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm going to be headed to Austin. So here this afternoon, ladies, let's kind of reconvene via phone call, and let's maybe get a work session together to start digging and using all of our different skills here to kind of see what we can find.
Christina.
Listen, I'm going to back out with what Chris said. This fucking media, it's like Elon Musk said, and we are the media now. If you want to know what the truth is, you don't turn on your TV and watch that, because they're just telling you a script, and I think it all comes from the CIA, but that's my personal opinion. But if you want to know what's really going on, then you need to be paying attention to, like, us, the Brandenburg News Network, the people that are out there willing to put everything on the line, because that's what we do. We know, putting this information out, that we can be targeted at any time. So just stay away from your mainstream media unless you just really want to be programmed. If you just really want that programming, then that's where you're going to get it.
Well, and I'm going to do a little bit of a segue here, because we're going to be going into 9/11 analysis here a little bit and what happened. I think that the biggest thing in watching the appointments by President Trump, and he made a great appointment. I'm going to put this up here just a second, because I think that this is significant. I like Tom Holman a lot, and he's a good guy. And hang on, let me see if I can get this up here a minute. I will share this. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to present. Ta-da. Best appointment yet, right there. Tom Holman as the border czar. And I know the guy. I think the world of him. I think he's going to get in there, and you're going to see some fur flying down there, and things are going to get that. I was like, okay, there you go. Now I'm happy. Now I'm happy seeing what
Well,
needed to be done right there. And so, but the other thing is, and we're gonna have to move on here a minute. But the other thing is watching who else involved in this has connections to AirPack, the APAC. We need to watch the APAC connections, because this is what's going to tell me. That's what I'm looking for. So thanks for being on, guys. I'm going to go to a quick break, and we'll talk to you guys in a little bit. Okay.
Love you, Donna.
Love you too. Bye, guys. And I'll be right back after 30 seconds with Richard Gage. Good morning and welcome to the second hour of Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it's the 14th day of November 2024, and welcome back to our show. My next guest is San Francisco Bay Area architect Richard Gage, AIA member of the American Institute of Architects and founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He now leads the charge for the new World Trade Center investigation, along with his courageous wife, Gail, who I love Gail. Gail's cool. At Richard Gage 9/11.
He says, I love Gail. Gail's cool.
Richard's listening in the background. Mr. Gage became interested in researching the destruction of the World Trade Center high rises after hearing the startling conclusions of the reluctant 9/11 researcher David Ray Griffin on the radio in 2006, which launched his own unyielding quest for the truth about 9/11. The organization he founded, AE 9/11 Truth, now numbers more than 3,600 architects and engineers, demanding a new investigation into the destruction of all three Trade Center high-rise buildings in 9/11. And welcome, sir. Welcome back to our show. And I know Gail's sitting in the background, and I love Gail. So hi, Gail. So
she says hi.
How are you doing this morning?
Oh, it's a great morning. I'm excited and ready to go. Today, we're looking at a deep dive into the Twin Towers. The last episode that you and I put together, we took a whole hour or more and went into Building 7, the third skyscraper that collapsed on 9/11. And today, it is indeed the Twin Towers. So, yeah, I'm all excited.
There was a lot of controversy, which was great after you came on, which I'm glad people are paying attention, right? And so it was really interesting to watch the comments that came back on the last show. And what I've told everybody is that pure journalism should give everyone a voice to speak, and it's up to ourselves to dive in and listen to what people say. I don't think any of us are looking for a new savior or something like that, because we already have one, and his name is Jesus Christ. And so we can listen to each other as brothers and sisters and learn things that maybe our conditioning has told us not to listen to. And I thought that I love listening to people that want to talk about Dr. Judy Wood. I listened to her right at the beginning when she came out. I love listening to what you have to say. And I think that we're putting a puzzle together of different pieces. And the assumption is that we're all on opposite sides trying to hide things. I'm not exactly thinking that that's the way it is. I think that we're looking at an elephant, and how to eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this up here and let you do your Richard Gage thing and go through this so that we can learn what you know.
Yeah, let's absolutely get into it. Let me find I got discombobulated here for a second. I'm looking for you. Where'd you go? Hold on
I hear.
1 second. Yeah, you're right there. I can hear you. But I got the wrong screen up. There we are. All right. So when we talked about World Trade Center Building 7, Donna, what we found was that it was unmistakably, irrefutably a controlled demolition. Now, this happened on 9/11. It's part of the conspiracy, however we define that word, of 9/11. It is a real problem for the official narrative. And so if Building 7 was a controlled demolition, we have to ask ourselves, is it possible that the Twin Towers could also be a crime of unimaginable proportions? So we have made the docuseries 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom to bring all of this evidence to bear in a special grand jury investigation. That is what we have done now with episode 1, already having been released at the website C2C, 911c2c.org, and people can watch the first episode, which is an orientation to the public. Now we're working on, and we'll issue in a couple of weeks, the second episode, and that we dive into the first part. There's 12 or more episodes here. Half of them are on Building 7. We go right into the fires and what they were actually like, and could they have brought down this building? And of course, the answer is no. But the details are incredibly provided with the expert witnesses. Altogether, about 24 throughout this whole series, as Mick Harrison of the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, their litigation director, and I present this evidence in the setting of a special grand jury investigation. So today we're giving you a sneak peek, the audience here, of the deep dive into the evidence of the World Trade Center Twin Towers. And yes, it is in fact extraordinary what we're going to find. And first, just looking at them, we note that, gosh, they were hailed by some as the crowning achievement when they were built in the mid-70s, early 70s. And others thought it was just heartless modernism. You extrude two squares until they become the tallest buildings in the world. Well, compare that to what we had as high-rise architecture before the modern era, with the beautiful unfolding massing of the Art Deco design of the Empire State Building. So just to give us a little bit of perspective here, but there were many engineering innovations associated with this new design of skyscraper reaching heights never before reached. These were the tallest buildings in the world at the time that they were built. So one of the things they had to do was get 50,000 occupants in each tower and 140,000 visitors per day up to their places of meeting and working. And so they did that by dividing the tower into 3 stages. And you take an elevator up and then transfer over and take another elevator. This was never done or had to be done before. An extraordinary feat. But the structural innovations were even more startling. We had a forest of columns in all the skyscrapers before this. And what we had was, with the Twin Towers, they moved half of those columns to the exterior, creating an exoskeleton with these prefabricated, welded in the shop, exterior structural steel perimeter sections with 3 vertical columns, 3 stories tall, and 3 horizontal spandrel panels holding them all together, welded, and they were bolted in place. In the center was 47 massive core columns, and they created an incredible opportunity for a lot of space between the core and the perimeter by laying these lightweight steel trusses between the two, spanning 60 feet on one side, on 2 sides, and then the other 2 sides 35 feet. So that created an open office planning. Each tower had 3.8 million square feet. Each floor was an acre in size. So you can see that and you can imagine, compared to the Empire State Building, we had wide open office areas now without all this forest of columns that they had to deal with. However, the ceilings were relatively low, 9 feet for such a long space, and this was intimidating for some psychologically, as was the marching of these columns all the way around the exterior. Felt like a jail cell to many of them. They were likened to. So these were some of the drawbacks. There were other drawbacks, such as the asbestos, which in the late 60s was put into all of these buildings, including this one, which required a $3 to $5 billion abatement that the city of New York was requiring the Port Authority to get rid of all this asbestos in this building, according to federal law. So these buildings were, for these sorts of reasons, only about half occupied by many researchers' estimates at the time of 9/11. They were white elephants. Nobody wanted them. And yet Larry Silverstein went and purchased them for $3.2 billion, having invested only $15 million of his own money, and leveraged that highly, putting massive terrorist insurance that was never on the building before he acquired these properties just 6 weeks prior to 9/11. So we keep this in mind because this sets a context for these crimes that we're going to be taking a look at, that the 9/11 Commission mostly ignored, but they did admit that they were set up to fail in this review of the crimes of 9/11, that this is not to be considered the last word on the attacks, the report, but only a beginning. And Tim Romer citing, we were extremely frustrated with the false statements that we were getting. That means lies. Max Cleland resigns from the commission, citing the investigation is compromised. It's a national scandal. America's being cheated. The White House wants to cover it up. Well, these alone are reasons for requiring a new investigation. Their own lawyer, John Farmer, cited in his book, The Ground Truth, I was shocked at how different the truth was from the way it was described. There was an agreement not to tell the truth to the American people. So we're setting a context for doubt here. He says what the government and military officials told Congress, the commission, the media, and the public about who knew what and when was almost entirely and inexplicably untrue, meaning the whole thing was a lie. Well, let's start looking at that lie. We had shock and awe on 9/11. We were put back into a place psychologically due to the trauma to all of us, especially those in New York, who were tuned in to what was happening. We were subjected to these attacks, destroying our cultural icons, killing thousands, people jumping out of the buildings. Well, we have had a lot of time, 20 years now, to look back, to begin to be willing to look back, because this was very, very painful for the last 20 years. When we do, we find, as we step out from our shock-induced trance and evaluate this new evidence that most people are unaware of, as we found out in our episode on Building 7. Most architects and engineers are completely unaware that a third tower collapsed on 9/11. And if you were if you haven't caught up with Donna and my podcast about Building 7, you will realize that this was the third tower to collapse, which wasn't hit by a plane, but it dropped straight down symmetrically into its own footprint very suddenly after witnesses heard explosions. And it fell at free fall acceleration as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky. So all of that alone, absent even the forensic evidence that we went over in some detail, points to and is proof of a controlled demolition. So now we're going to look and see and just remind ourselves what happened that morning?
On September 11th, we learned that 4 passenger planes were hijacked and taken radically off course. Within an hour, 2 of the planes had flown into the enormous steel towers of the World Trade Center, creating fires and eventually toppling them. Dazed by the news, the American public soon believed the fires in the towers had burned so hot they caused the steel frames of the buildings to give way. A myth developed, fed by official sources through the media to a bewildered audience. Elements of the myth: the impact of the airplanes, gallons of burning jet fuel, steel melting, the buildings failing and suddenly imploding. In a mere 10 seconds, 110 stories hurtled earthward, pulverizing into dust. Right from the start, on the street itself, the official story was born.
Come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
The myth bled into the FEMA report and was echoed by the experts.
It was the combination of the impact load doing great damage to the building, followed by the fire, that caused collapse.
Well, there's the official story in a nutshell, and we should examine that, and that's what we're about today. Is that true? Is it the fires that brought the towers down? The North Tower was hit at about 8:46 by the plane. It collapsed over an hour later. So it's not the planes and the massive explosion and the broken columns that brought down the tower, nor was it the jet fuel, because NIST acknowledges that 90% of that jet fuel was burned up outside the building. The rest of it was gone in 10 minutes. It merely started the fires that are blamed for the collapse of these towers. The South Tower was hit about 9 in the morning. It collapses about an hour later. Hour and a half later in the case of the North Tower, an hour later in the case of the South Tower, by flight 175. So there were some investigations into this, into the failures of these towers, starting with volunteers from the American Society of Civil Engineers, very well-placed volunteers who worked themselves into the subsequent FEMA report, which finally received a little bit of funding, $600,000, hardly enough to set them up. But the New York Times notes that their investigations were hampered with bureaucratic restrictions. They couldn't get access to the blueprints of the building or adequate access to the site. In fact, they described it as a tour guide. They couldn't get out and really investigate. They didn't have access to the public to request photographs or videos. And so they produced a report in 2002, which led to a real, an increased amount of funding by NIST, $20 million anyway, who produced a report in 2005 about the Twin Towers. What was their essential report? That fires caused the weakening of the steel trusses, and they sagged. And when they sagged, they pulled in the perimeter columns. Well, sagging trusses can't pull in perimeter columns. There's not enough force there. But in their computer model, they added a 5,000-pound lateral force on each of the columns, forcing them to buckle, all of them. And then the top came down and drove the rest of the building down to the ground. We'll look at that in some detail. But this is the official story in a nutshell, and this is how they sought to prove it, by computer models. Because most of the steel, as we'll discover, was sent to China for recycling before investigators could get their hands on it and do a proper investigation. The fires, though, we have photographs of them. They are shown to be diminished at the time of the collapse. The thick black smoke indicates oxygen-starved, cooler fires. So we have a problem. The fires aren't going to be able to produce what NIST said they produced. So we have to use the scientific method. What is that? We have a question. How do the towers collapse? We do background research, make observations, construct a hypothesis. That's our best guess as to how the towers came down. We make predictions. Was it the planes that brought them down? Maybe it was the ensuing fires, or maybe it was the ensuing explosions, which NIST has not documented whatsoever in their final report, but you'll see plenty of evidence of, in fact, controlled demolitions with explosions. So these are all hypotheses that we can test with experiments. We analyze the results. We draw conclusions. If the hypothesis is corroborated, we report the results in an open, transparent manner so all can build on the body of the work that we're doing here. If the hypothesis is not corroborated, we go back. We construct a new hypothesis, and that's what we're doing today, a new revised hypothesis to replace the faulty, fraudulent hypothesis that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people, produced. So let's do it. Let's start with some background research. What are the forces that destroy buildings? Fire is certainly one of them. It's an organic, chaotic process. It burns in a certain area roughly about 20 minutes and then moves on looking for fresh new fuel sources. And NIST even acknowledges that the fires don't persist and didn't in any one location for more than about 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, well, that's very helpful. Have we ever lost a skyscraper? No. Never have lost a skyscraper due to collapses, and we'll look at a few of them. But wood frame buildings, for instance, they would fall over. Any structure collapsing due to fire would fall over to the path of least resistance, not straight down through the path of greatest resistance. And not in Los Angeles, where we had a 62-story building burning 3.5 hours over 5 floors, nor in Philadelphia burning a 38-story building over 18 hours on 8 floors. So fires, when they cause, there was a fire in this building, the structure sags, as we saw in our last podcast on BNN. And with building 7, we saw the Cardington test. They actually lit on fire an 8-story building, a steel frame building, no structure, no failure at all. Not even since 9/11, with these fully engulfed fires, have we lost a steel frame fire protected structure. So how in the world then did these relatively small and cooler fires bring down the towers? Well, we'll find that they didn't, and we'll find the evidence for what did. But in natural collapses, like these due to earthquakes, we have the building falling over to the path of least resistance. It's recognizable, though damaged, as a building. The columns and beams are not severed one from another, and the concrete is not pulverized to a fine powder. So this is another type of destruction that we need to keep in mind, because it's a precedent, as is buildings that have been blown up, where we have thick, billowing, enormous pyroclastic-like clouds of smoke and pulverized concrete, sounds of explosions heard and seen by witnesses. We have flashes of light that are seen by witnesses. So if you have these features, you know you have explosions. Well, explosions can be harnessed quite well in controlled demolitions to bring buildings down, like you see here. It takes a team of experts to bring these buildings down with precisely placed and timed shaped cutter charges placed next to the columns and beams in the building, starting at the lower levels usually, and then bringing them up. This is a feat that only a handful of companies in the United States can even accomplish. And fire never has, not even in the Mandarin Hotel, where it's fully engulfed in Beijing, China in 2009. So it just simply does not happen. This building survived. All these buildings survived. Steel frame, fireproofed structures do not collapse due to fire. Not even at World Trade Center 5, which was fully engulfed in fire. Did it collapse? No collapse. So we have an understanding of the precedent here that NIST is up against when they try to present a collapse by fire theory and a few broken columns in the case of these towers. So last week we looked carefully at the typical features of controlled demolition and how they amount to proof thereof. And so we have to look carefully now today at the features at the World Trade Center towers, beginning with feature number 1. Is there a sudden onset of destruction? Well, the North Tower is at rest, and all of a sudden it's in downward continuous motion. There's no jolt or hesitation upon meeting the cold, hard, intact steel below the point of plane impacts. What's going on here instead? Look at the South Tower. No jolt or hesitation. It's at rest, and all of a sudden it's in uniform downward motion. No jolt, no hesitation, no impact. Well, let's look at the official narrative, because NIST claims that this upper block above the point of plane impacts drove the rest of the building down to the ground and then destroyed itself. This is called the crush down, crush up theory, but it suffers quite miserably from Newton's third law of motion. We'll come to that. But this author, Zdenek Bazant of Northwestern University in Chicago, submitted this paper, very complex paper, a paper that took engineers 10 years to decode. He submitted it just 2 days after 9/11. The rest of us were in shock, right? We're trying to figure out when's the next plane coming? Who did this to us? What's going on here? And yet this gentleman, no, he's in his den creating the most complex paper ever put together for building collapses. And he is creating the theoretical basis for NIST's column failure theory. So this paper remains the key support for NIST's theory. What does it rely on? Well, what it doesn't rely on is Newton's third law. There's an equal and opposite destructive force when two bodies collide. Run a Mack truck into a Volkswagen. What happens? The Volkswagen gets destroyed. Does it matter if we drop the Volkswagen onto the Mack truck? No. The upper part is the lightest part of any structure. It cannot possibly destroy the cold, hard, heavier, intact steel below. It's not going to happen. These towers were virtual pyramids. At the top is the lightest structural column sections, which you see here changing and getting heavier and heavier as we go down the building, and larger also in the core columns until at halfway they're 52 inches by 22 inches, and then almost solid steel 52 inches by 22 inches down at the bottom. So these are virtually pyramids. So we have to ask ourselves another question here. Is the top part destroying the lower part, or does the top part get destroyed in the first 3 seconds? Take a look. It's being destroyed. Let me make it easier for you. Actually, let's look at the lower red line. This top part is telescoping in on itself. The lower red line is not moving down. This structure is not destroying the structure below. It is being destroyed, just like the Volkswagen would be destroyed. In this case, what's destroying it, though? Because if it were there, we would see it driving the rest of the building down to the ground. But none of the photos, none of the videos show that. They show instead that it is gone after 3 seconds and something else is happening, something terrible. If the upper structure was driving the building down to the ground, it would have destroyed these few remaining columns, core columns that stand 1,000 feet in the air. But no, something else is happening here, and you get a sense of it by looking and trying to guess which one of these photos is a volcano and which one is the World Trade Center North Tower. Just take a guess. And I'll give you a hint. The one on the right is the volcano, with upward, outward arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks freely flying, solid objects trailing thick white smoke clouds in each case. Why is the Twin Tower ejecting solid objects trailing thick white smoke clouds? Steel is not flammable in office fire conditions, nor by jet fuel, as we'll see. So what are these thick white smoke clouds? Well, thermite can give us an answer, because the other byproduct of thermite, we saw that molten iron was one byproduct in our last episode with Donna. But what is the other byproduct? Aluminum oxide ash with these thick white smoke clouds. That is the only reasonable conclusion that can be drawn from this, especially when we look at, as we did last week, the evidence of thermite throughout the World Trade Center dust and in the aftermath. So this theory is wrong altogether. We don't have the upper part driving the rest of the building down to the ground. What do we have? The building is exploding, hurling laterally ejected structural steel sections out away from the core columns, and they survive that somehow, and then they come down. So none of this was acknowledged in the NIST report, who had $20 million to study this and determine, tasked by Congress to determine how and why all three towers collapsed. But let's look at feature number 2 of controlled demolition, explosions. Are there any witnesses of explosions? NIST says no, other than the explosion, of course, of the plane impact. And what they say down at the bottom in the lobby are explosions due to jet fuel coming down the elevator shafts, which is just ludicrous. We'll come to that. But let's look at these witnesses. What do they say? This is extraordinary. There's now 186 of them. 12,000 pages of testimony were produced by the oral recordings of these first responders. Graham McQueen, professor, the late professor, read every one of those pages. This is what he found in 186 of these. I won't read them all to you, but a couple of representative examples. We felt the ground shake. You could see the tower sway, and then it just came down. All of a sudden, the ground just started shaking. Felt like a train running under my feet. The next thing we know, we look up, and the tower is collapsing. It shook my bones. Shortly before the first tower came down, I remember feeling the ground shaking. I heard a terrible noise, and then debris just started flying everywhere. Again and again, you're going to hear this same order of events where the first responders are seeing something, feeling something, hearing something before the tower actually collapses. Now, that's extraordinarily important and completely ignored by NIST. Every one of these expert witnesses. I saw flash, flash, flash at the lower level of the building. You know, like when they demolish a building. With each popping sound, it was initially an orange and then a red flash that came out of the building. Then it would just go all around the building on both sides. Saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these brief flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed. I saw low-level flashes. I saw flash, flash, flash. And then it looked like the building came down. An explosion appeared at the very top. Simultaneously, from all four sides, material shot out horizontally. And then there seemed to be a momentary delay before you could see the beginning of the collapse. There was an explosion in the South Tower, one floor under another. When it hit about the fifth floor, I figured it was a bomb because it looked like a synchronized, deliberate kind of thing. Seemed like on television when they blow up these buildings, seemed like it was going all the way around like a belt. All these explosions. The building was blowing out on all four sides. We actually heard the pops, you know? You heard the pops of the building. I thought the terrorists planted explosives somewhere in the building. That's how loud it was. A crackling explosive. Another loud boom at the upper floors, and then a series of smaller explosions which appeared to go completely around the building at the upper floors. And another loud earth-shattering blast with a large fireball that blew out more debris. The lower level of the building, you know, like when they demolish a building, that's what I thought I saw. Did you see any flashes? I said, yes. I thought it was just me. He said, no, I saw them too. Everybody, I think, at this point still thought these things were blown up. So I was fully expecting anything else to blow up. You were there when the planes hit? No, I was there when the building exploded. You mean when it fell down? No, when it exploded. The widely held belief that the Twin Towers collapsed as a result of the airplane impacts and the resulting fires is actually revisionist history. The vast majority of reporters on the ground who witnessed and reported the event firsthand cited explosions as the cause of the collapse. So in addition to all those first responders we just heard from, we're now looking at 36 different TV reporters on the day of 9/11 who reported this as an explosion-based event. Most people have no idea because the story changed abruptly the next day when local TV anchors and national mainstream media outlets reported a different story. Fire Marshal John Coyle and Christopher Pennew explicitly support this finding. He says, I thought it was exploding, actually. That's what I thought for hours afterward. Everybody, I think, at that point still thought these things were blown up. At that point, a debate began to rage about whether to continue rescue operations in the other still standing tower, because the perception was that the building looked like it had been taken out with charges. Well, this gets even more interesting. Donna, there's some feedback on from your side. If you don't mind muting until you want to say something or ask a question, or somebody over there, that'd be helpful. Thanks. Graham McQueen and Ted Walters' new research here in this report is the systematic effort to collect and analyze news clips from more than 70 hours of original coverage from that day. And there's three categories of reporting, which will come to eyewitness, narrative, and source-based reporting. Let's listen to a few of them.
But as I was looking up, I saw the entire explosion. It looked exactly like the first two, but we certainly had the most perfect vantage point for that explosion. It was unbelievable. And
there has just been a huge explosion. We can see a billowing smoke rising, and I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower.
Towers, a huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We're not sure exactly what happened, but it was another explosion on the far side of one of the buildings from where we're standing. The reverberation and another explosion on the right-hand side.
Watch the right
it's
side.
Exploding.
It's ripping apart.
On the far side of the building, there seemed to be another explosion, and also on the right-hand side, there was also another explosion. We're not sure if that was extra reverberation from what happened at the World Trade Center, or if that was an added explosion. We heard a very loud blast and explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse before us.
Again, there has been a second explosion here in Manhattan at the Trade Center.
And believe it or not, there was another major explosion. The building itself, literally the top of it, came down, sending smoke and debris everywhere.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse?
To me, it sounded like an explosion.
A huge explosion, a huge rumbling cloud were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
But it literally exploded and came down as though it had been hit.
We heard an explosion.
The explosion happened was shooting pieces of the plane. There are pieces of the plane on Church Street.
There's another explosion as we speak.
Something either exploded or fell off the side of the one building that was attacked.
Then the entire top of the building just blew up.
Just seconds ago, there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
It was just a small explosion, and then rocks and debris and everything started pouring down. And we were about 2 blocks away when the second explosion hit, and all we heard was just this small explosion. Then you saw a roar of an explosion and all kinds of smoke billowing out, debris falling down.
It's unbelievable because you hear these explosions. In fact, I just heard another one. I don't know if it was like an after effect or whatnot, just while you were on the phone talking about the school closings. I'm hearing another explosion, just so you know. I'm hearing another rumble. It's what you can feel when these tremors come is that it literally comes up under your feet. That's what it feels like. That's the best way I know to describe it.
Certainly didn't imagine that there would be second or tertiary explosions, so they parked some of their vehicles in those areas, and many of those vehicles, people in those vehicles, have lost their lives.
Well, we just heard another explosion go off a couple of minutes ago, Chris.
I don't know what happened with the audio there.
A bunch more people sort of running this way. A woman on her bike was screaming as it went off. And there was
Are you hearing the audio anymore,
officer, he's plain
Donna?
clothes, walking by.
Here, I just muted. Yeah, I can hear it. I just unmuted. So
Okay. Thanks. I don't hear it. That's crazy.
That last bomb went, or when that last collapse happened, and
When the first
There
tower
we go.
collapsed,
Hear it
it was
now.
a massive explosion. When that explosion occurred, it was like the scene out of a horror film.
Another explosion, a rolling blast of fire, a rolling column of fire towards us.
You saw people being wheeled on gurneys away from the site of the explosion. I looked up, and that's when I heard the pardon me. That's when I heard the explosion. That's when the second tower came down.
It was an explosion.
2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower.
saw the explosion and also the collapse of the tower.
With subsequent explosions and
explosions were coming down the building. It looked as if charges had been set on each floor and they were in succession going off.
He received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place. And then an hour after the first hit here, with the first crash that took place, he said, there was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. But the bottom line is that according to the chief of safety of the New York City Fire Department, he says that he probably lost a great many men in those secondary explosions.
Put us about a block and a half away from the site.
They lost many men in those secondary explosions.
Is that there may have been explosive device planted either in the building or in the adjacent area.
Office supplies, many blocks from the site of the actual explosion where they now...
I was actually in the subway heading towards the World Trade Center right around Franklin Street. And after the first explosion, the subway station started to fill with smoke. The subway cars started to fill with smoke, and the subways actually stopped.
And I was walking on Broadway at Fullerton, and suddenly we heard an explosion. It was the first tower coming down. I started to walk out. I walked down Broadway towards Canal, and we heard a second explosion.
Covered in the debris and the dust from the explosion itself. It was rocked with a lot of the explosion from the force of the twin World Trade Centers when they came down.
I was out front as you were when the second explosion occurred, because the explosion threw debris on top of a lot of people. That was when the real panic began.
Sequence of crashes, then explosions, and then the collapse.
This must have been ground zero where this thing blew up. Car after car after car. Buses completely obliterated and burned straight down to the steel.
that's the first time we're hearing that. So 2 planes and explosives that were in the building. Is that correct?
That is the working theory at this point.
The first wave of rescue workers who went in were trapped, many of them killed by the second blast,
and escaped through the lobby where they believe there was a bomb in the lobby.
I believe the bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds in the first plane hit.
Well, this is incredible testimony, and we have to take it seriously, unlike NIST, who ignored all of these accounts of explosions, save the airplanes into the buildings. So, and claiming there were no other witnesses of explosions. Well, how many did we just see? Well, in terms of the anchors themselves, there were 21 eyewitness reports, what they personally perceived as explosions before and or during the destruction. There were 22 narrative reports wherein they refer to the destruction as an explosion-based event in the course of their reporting. And 3 were source-based reports from the FDNY, the NYPD, and the FBI, the 3 most important government agencies involved, who said they suspected that explosives were used to bring down the towers before the story changed. The FBI even called it their working theory. So there's only 4 reports that describe the collapse as a result of plane impacts and this ensuing fires. What about those? Their individual accounts add very little support to what very soon became the official collapse hypothesis, because 2 of them were more than 12 blocks away. The third actually stated in a different context, the entire building has just collapsed, as if demolition team set off. When you see demolitions in those old buildings. The fourth was quite close to the South Tower near Ron and Santa, another anchor, who vividly described seeing the building exploding and hearing a noise associated with an implosion. So they seem to get discredited. In fact, they're expressing either uninformed opinions or else carrying out someone else's instructions about the cause of the collapse. So what do we learn? Unlike the 118 firefighters, now 186, who provided their accounts weeks or months after the event, it was the job of reporters to spontaneously communicate their perception and interpretation of events. Thus, when their reporting is compiled into one record, we're left with a rich and largely unfiltered collective account of what really took place. Considered alongside the FDNY oral histories, these reporter statements constitute strong corroborating evidence that explosives were indeed used to destroy the towers. So the hypothesis was of explosions bringing down the towers was not only prevalent among the reporters, but clearly the dominant hypothesis of the day. So we have other witnesses of explosions, i.e. the equipment at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, 21 miles north. There were seismic waves generated when the towers came down and near the time of the plane impacts. So what do they really reveal? Because the first plane impact is nearly associated with a 0.9 magnitude event. Let's look at that event. The event, they say this is due to plane impacts because it occurs like pretty much right there. But if you look really carefully, you find that the event itself occurs at 8:46 and 26 seconds. But the plane impacts don't occur until 14 seconds later. So how can the plane impact be causing the seismic event 14 seconds earlier? It's not. And in fact, NIST says, the plane impacts as identified by the National Transportation and Safety Board radar, which the 9/11 Commission used. So it's pretty darn accurate to within a second. But NIST says, no, we think the plane impacts happened 10 seconds earlier than that. Because we looked at the videos and we studied, what we think really happened. Okay. Can you prove that? You're still 4 seconds off, right? What gives with that discrepancy also? Well, they got LDEO, Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, run by Columbia University, to move their data back 3 seconds in a private contract, which we do not get to see the results of, the report from. And that's where they make up 3 of those 4 seconds. So, okay, that's real interesting. What else can we learn from their work? The South Tower, we have an event occurring at 9:02 and 54 seconds near the time of the plane impact. Well, the plane impact in this case doesn't occur for 17 seconds later. Well, NIST comes back and says, well, we think the plane impact happened at a different time, 12 seconds earlier than the NTSB radar. Okay, can you prove that? You're still 5 seconds off. Nope. We're just contracted with LDAO to get that one moved back 3 seconds also, which brings them to within 2 seconds. So you can see the kind of science that NIST is up to here. Well, it gets worse. What could cause the seismic impacts if it weren't the planes? Well, let's look at some testimony from eyewitnesses like Mike Percaro. He says the whole building seemed to shake and there was a loud explosion. When the two arrived at the sea level, they found the machine shop gone. Nothing there but a rubble, Mike said. We're talking about a 50-ton hydraulic press gone. The two made their way to the parking garage, but found that it too, the parking garage, was gone. There were no walls. There was no rubble on the floor. You can't see anything. Well, this is down in the basement. NIST doesn't acknowledge any explosions in the basement. But here's a witness, one of several, of one. He says a steel and concrete door that weighed 300 pounds wrinkled up like a piece of aluminum foil lying on the ground. A bomb had gone off in the building, as speculates this witness. Oops. Okay, let's go to this witness, Willie Rodriguez, who was a janitor in the building and was actually given a Medal of Honor by the President of the United States for his courageous actions that day.
I think a bomb went off in the lobby
we'll get
first,
to him.
then a plane hit the building.
The bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds in the first plane hit.
Okay, now we'll go to Willie Rodriguez.
On 9/11, I came in late. I went straight to the basement, and I was there with my supervisor, Antonita Altaramachia, and 14 other people. When we hear at 8:46, an explosion that went boom, very loud, pushed us upwards. When they pushed us upwards, all the walls cracked, the false ceiling fell on top of us, the sprinkler system got activated. Everybody started screaming in horror because we didn't know what happened. And the first thing that comes to my mind is that a generator just blew up on the mechanical room. The mechanical room was located right below us. The building has 6 up levels of basement, B1, B2, all the way down to B6. I was on B1. The explosion came from between B2 and B3. That's how we felt it. Now, I work in the building, Carl, for 20 years. I would know exactly the difference between an explosion coming from the bottom and one coming from the top. This one came from the bottom and prior to the plane hitting the tower. Now, when I went to verbalize it, because everybody's screaming in horror, and in total despair at that moment, when I went to verbalize it, we hear, bah! This is 6 to 7 seconds after the initial explosion. And it was the impact. It sounded like an impact all the way on the top of the building, and then an explosion. And a person comes running into the office saying, explosion, explosion, hands extended, burned 33% of his body, all the skin hanging from under his armpits, peeled off, all the way to the top of the fingertips, and missing pieces of his face. And I said, what are you doing? And you know, what happened? This guy was Felipe David, a black guy that I never met before from Honduras, who worked actually filling up those vending machines with supplies, soda, candies, etc. And he was burned 33% of his body from that first explosion. Now, when I see this, everybody's screaming in horror. I say, don't move, because I was going to pick up the phone to call the emergency medical unit that was located on the South Tower. When I went to pick it up, bah, another explosion. And the building shakes so much. And remember, the building was designed to oscillate because of the wind factor, but it oscillated so much that the wall started cracking. You could hear the cracking. And everybody started running inside the office.
Well, this is an incredibly important testimony because it proves that there were indeed explosions that NIST ignored in the basement. But expert Andre Rousseau, applied geophysics expert, author of more than 50 published peer-reviewed papers, says, hey, these are not from plane impacts. The frequency of these seismic waves, Raleigh waves, attributed to LDEO, to the impacts, were on the order of only 1 hertz, 1 cycle per second. But aircraft crash impacts have much higher frequencies, above 10 hertz, and often up to about 100 hertz. These frequencies were filtered out by the 0.6 to 5 hertz bandpass filters used by LDEO because they just want to record explosions, meaning earthquakes and things like that, at which explosions produce similar results of. So he says the range of the instruments cited by LDEO doesn't even allow for the recording of these frequencies from airplane impacts. The seismic equipment is designed to detect seismic events like earthquakes and explosions around 1 hertz. Okay, well, that's helpful. He also says the actual waves generated by the crash, the airplane crash, had to have been deadened even before hitting the ground. So he's exposing something here that's very important regarding the planes. What about the actual collapses? Because there were seismic events associated near the time of the collapses also. The collapse of the South Tower created a 2.1 magnitude event. Let's look at it. We have the event occurring at 10:28 that morning and 31 seconds. The tower starts descending at 10:28, about 9 seconds earlier. And the first debris, which is the lightest debris, hits the ground about a second later. But the heaviest debris doesn't hit the ground until about 4 seconds later. So that's what would have generated these waves, but it's 4 seconds later than the seismic event. So how could it have? Well, NIST, as you can imagine, has an answer for this too. They contract privately with LDEO, Columbia University, and get them to move their entire data back 3 seconds, yet again, a third time. No report. But this helps them account for most of that problem. Well, what else could have created that seismic event? This is important, right? Let's look at the waves themselves. On the left side of the purple dashed line, you see, which is when the tower starts descending. So before the tower starts descending, in fact, about 4 seconds before the tower starts descending, we see very well-formed P waves, primary waves. Well, where did those come from? Because before that, it's just random background, the Earth doing what the Earth does all the time. Well, there, in fact, are explosions going off at near the Twin Towers, as documented by camera shakes 6 and 10 seconds before the tower starts descending. What does that remind me of? How about the testimony of the first responders, 186 of them or so? Well, fewer of them than that were this specific about explosions many seconds before the tower collapsed. Well, here is a camera on the ground looking at the North Tower on a tripod, it is, and it shakes 6 seconds before the collapse. Professor Graham McQueen did this research. There's the shake. That's not me. I'm not shaking the camera or anything. This is all available publicly. And then the tower comes down. So 6 seconds before that shaking, here's another tripod mounted camera on the top of a roof this time, looking at the North Tower. And that North Tower, you might want to go on mute, who's ever not on mute, because we're here in your cell phone. And we have the camera shaking right. Oh, I missed it. I'm going to go back and look carefully. This camera shakes right there. And then, in this case, 10 seconds later, the building begins its sudden uniform downward descent after all these clouds begin to erupt on the top. So this is evidence of seismic signals before the collapses and the cause of them, which is corroborated by the first responders. Let's look at the first one. In the case of the South Tower, 2.1 magnitude event happens at 9:59 that morning and 04 seconds. The start of the tower collapse happens 5 seconds earlier, and the first debris doesn't even hit the ground until 7 seconds after the seismic event. So how can it cause the seismic event? The first debris is the lightest. The later, so what can cause that? Well, NIST says, we actually contracted yet again with LDEO and got them to move their data back 3 seconds. So that's what we think gets us close enough to answering the question. Well, it doesn't. It's a clear case of fraud, especially when you consider what really could have brought down the South Tower. In this case, yet again, we have at 9:58 and 56 seconds, another camera, tripod mounted, shaking, in this case, 3 seconds before the start of the collapse, again, corroborating those first responders who described explosions before the collapse. Let's look at this one. This is TV station NY1, New York 1, tripod mounted camera. And this one's more subtle. So watch very carefully. Right there is the shake. And 3 seconds later, the building begins its descent. So yet again, corroborating the first responders. Well, there's a problem here. They say it's due to the debris hitting the ground, but let's look at the reality. This is not ground, it's concrete floors, dampening yet again that direct connection of this collapse to the seismic equipment 20 miles north. The concrete floors, floor trusses, and gypsum board walls, these building contents were actually, as we'll see in a moment, pulverized to concrete powder. And there's no seismic component hardly at all from them. The steel frame itself is shattered into individual wall units, as we'll see, that are 4 to 8 tons each, which is relatively small, seismically speaking. They don't even hit the ground all at once, but they're scattered over a period of 15 seconds. And on a 7-story concrete basement structure. So this is all comes out through the work of Andre Rousseau. It's equally distributed over the entire superblock of the World Trade Center. And note that as you see the towers coming down simultaneously in this case, so we can compare them, they are nearly identical collapses or destruction, as we'll see. Yet they're identical buildings, they're twins, but the yield strength is 1.6 times greater in the North Tower than the South. And so that is dramatically different. It's on the logarithmic scale, so it's 1.6 times greater energetically. Well, how can that be if they're identical collapses and identical buildings? So the answer must and can only be that there were different quantities and or placement of explosives in the building. Andre Rousseau says, identical buildings and nearly identical collapses can't possibly produce seismic events of extreme different energy releases on an order of magnitude. Well, that's very helpful. Well, this documentation of the seismic evidence is actually very carefully pointed out in point TT7. Why did the Twin Towers collapse? The seismic evidence in the consensus 9/11, the best 9/11 evidence. You can see this work at consensus911.org. Elizabeth Woodworth and David Ray Griffin assembled this group very carefully to present only the best evidence of all, and you're looking at it in this presentation substantially relative to the World Trade Center. Feature number 3, is there a straight down symmetrical collapse? Well, let's look at it. It starts out as if it's tipping over. So it's tipping over at 22 degrees, the South Tower. But how can, with asymmetrical damage from the airplanes and the fires and asymmetrical damage from this load that's falling off the building, how do we get complete symmetrical destruction all the way around the face, all 4 faces of these buildings? It makes no sense. It's incongruent. Just like the firefighters described, all the way around the building, like a belt, all these explosions. So something else is happening here very specifically. Let's look and zoom in on this looped video to the leading corner of this destruction. What do we see? We see what can only be individually pre-placed explosives at the perimeter structure. I see a dozen of them just right here. So what is this not? This is not energy weapons weakening the steel so it could have a natural collapse. No, this can only be pre-placed, relatively small structure explosives. It's not a nuclear weapon destroying the towers, right? This is not big. It's not bright. It's not full of the radiation that we know to expect from a nuclear weapon going off. So these are theories that have been put out there that are and have been debunked by the evidence we saw last week with the extreme heat from the molten iron from OSHA documenting 2,600 degree temperatures in that case, molten metal, molten iron and steel, which takes 3,000 degrees almost to begin to melt. So this is extreme heat, which is denied in the directed energy weapons theory that we looked very carefully at. The explosives are denied in the directed energy weapons theory. No explosions, no extreme heat, no nanothermite, no thermite. That is what they say. And yet what we proved last week was that we have all 4 of those, forensic evidence of all 4 of those phenomena at the World Trade Center towers. So this is the evidence that has solid proof for it. When somebody comes along and provides theories for which they have literally no proof and which the evidence shows otherwise, I begin to get suspect. And they say there's no evidence of isolated explosive ejections from the towers, but you're looking at it here, 20, even 40 stories down below. We have these squibs or isolated explosive ejections occurring 60 stories down below. There's no accounting for these in the official narrative or any unofficial narrative other than the one that we're presenting here today. Out of the left side of the South Tower, during its collapse, we even see isolated explosive ejections, a dozen of them in this looped video, destroying the internal rigidity of this structure, which allows it, even as it begins to fall off the tower, it then settles down because it's lost its internal rigidity and just begins to fall back into the tower as a mass. Well, how fast do they fall? Well, David Chandler, physics teacher, actually clocks this. And this is very important because it falls near free fall acceleration. It's accelerating straight down through the path of greatest resistance at 2/3 of free fall acceleration, which equates to the fact that 90% of the structure had to have been removed so that it could fall. And through what? Through 80,000 tons of structural steel beneath the point of plane impacts, as if it weren't even there. These columns and the core columns, 47 of them, massive columns, again at halfway down, 52 inches by 22 inches, gave almost no resistance. Only 10% of their strength remained. Compare that to the World Trade Center 7, which did fall at free fall acceleration, indicating not one of those 80 columns gave any resistance to that building's collapse. So what happens to these perimeter structural steel sections? They are ejected laterally, 4 and 8 ton perimeter steel framing, landing in the buildings all around them, ejected 600 feet in every direction at 80 miles an hour, clocked by physicists, landing 600 feet away. This is not energy weapons. This is the result of explosive force, a massive explosive force that can move these 4 and 8 ton structural steel sections that far. And they are freely flying. This is not like a banana peeling off the side of the towers like some debunkers have tried to hypothesize. This is hundreds of structural steel sections freely flying, laterally ejected. Look at this one. Back to, forward to, back to. This is laterally ejected. How does gravity work? Gravity works down. What's going on here? Out. And this one is in fact hitting building 7. So, which did some damage over there as we looked at last week. There's enough energy to hurl a 200-pound cannonball 3 miles. This is an amazing quantity of energy that completely covered the and beyond the boundary of the World Trade Center towers, impacting building 7 to the north and the World Financial Center to the west, to the left. By the way, if 100,000 tons of structural steel framing is distributed outside the building's footprint, we have to ask ourselves the question, what's destroying the building? What's crushing the building? Almost all the steel is well outside the footprint of the tower. How can it then also crush the building? Well, maybe it was the concrete, because there were 110 floors of concrete. We're going to be looking for them, each an acre in size. Poured concrete on metal decking over lightweight steel trusses. We're going to be looking for 110 acre-size floors, but we don't find 50. We don't find 20. We don't find 10. We don't find 1 acre-size floor. We don't find a half or a quarter or an eighth of an acre-size concrete floor. What we see at the bottom is a pile, 4 or 6-story pile of miscellaneous metal columns. Hey, in a real concrete, in a real pancaking collapse like this one from an earthquake in Mexico, we see pancakes. We're looking for them, but we don't find them. Where are all the floors? Where is the concrete? What happened to it? Oh, there it is. It's pulverized in midair. 90,000 tons of concrete. All the videos, all the photos show pulverized in midair to 100 micron particles and distributed laterally across lower Manhattan in a 3 square mile area in a blanket 3 inches thick. So, if that's true, and you're looking at the proof of that truth, and 90,000 tons of concrete is pulverized and spread from river to river across lower Manhattan, what's crushing the building? It wasn't the steel, which was a third of the weight of the building. It's not the concrete, which is another third of the weight of this building. Where is Zdeněk Bazant getting all of the weight to crush the building below? Well, not only did he use all of the weight of all that concrete and all that steel, which wasn't there, but he multiplied it times 2. Because engineers finally, after 10 years, decoded this obscure piece of mathematical wizardry. And they found that he doubled the mass up above and he decreased the column strength below by a factor of 3, rigging the entire equation in favor of a collapse. And yet, this paper remains the key theoretical basis for NIST's column failure theory. There are many errors, not just 6, but here's 6 that were put forth by this team of engineers that decoded his work: Tony Zambodi, Richard Johns, Gregory Zudolinski. And the American Society of Civil Engineers said, we're not going to publish this. What? Why? It's out of scope, they said. Well, wait a minute. How is it out of scope to challenge the concepts and facts in a previously published paper in the Journal of Engineering and Mechanics in this case? That's the whole idea of peer-reviewed science. We challenge each other's work through the peer-reviewed process. So there's a lawsuit and an ethics violation proceeding from this. As you can imagine, we have to have a way to get explosives and incendiaries into the building. How do we do that? Well, Kevin Ryan, from his blog digwithin.net, looks at demolition access to the towers. Could it be that the nanothermite, which we saw proof of in our last episode, was installed during an operation that was said to have been fireproofing? Because there were fireproofing upgrades in the year before 9/11. In fact, those fireproofing upgrades occur coincidentally at the location of the plane impacts in each case. So that's got to be investigated by a real criminal investigator who could get to the bottom of it. But our government has not done that. How else could explosives have been brought into the building? Well, if you had access to the elevators in the building, you'd have access to the core columns in the building. And wouldn't it be convenient if you had the largest elevator modernization in the world going on the 9 months prior to 9/11, which they did, documented in Elevator World, March 2001. And why would the Port Authority have given one of the largest and most sophisticated elevator modernization programs in history to a small maintenance company, Ace Elevator, with basically only one customer? Well, this has to be answered too. We certainly want an investigation of Ace Elevators, whose employees were missing that day, curiously, from this elevator modernization work. There was a labor dispute, and the members of that company, 50 of them, were pulled out to a union meeting to discuss some business. Well, yeah, we got to get to the bottom of that too, as well as the disposition of 180,000 tons of missing steel, and easily the largest and most perplexing structural failures in history. We have 400 truckloads a day lined up to remove this debris starting just 2 weeks after 9/11. In fact, starting the day of 9/11. This is the forensic evidence. It was shipped to China for recycling. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene. Prompting Bill Manning, editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering magazine, to cry out, crucial evidence that could answer many questions is on the slow boat to China, showing an astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately. Did it? No. It continued unabated. And that is just one of the many, many reasons we have a real call for an investigation based on the evidence of destruction with explosives, which is the only thing that can answer these 10 key characteristic and some very uncharacteristic features of controlled demolition. Fire doesn't account for any one of these features, let alone all 10 of them. And so we have what becomes proof of controlled demolition, proof to 3,600 architects and engineers signed on to the petition demanding a new investigation into the destruction, many of whom will appear in episode 2, the next episode to be released from 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom, where we present to a special grand jury, as I mentioned, and which you can co-produce this film along with us. We've already filmed it in 2 separate trips to Washington, D.C. in the special grand jury boardroom. And we are now in post-edit. And so all we have to do is edit it, and that takes time. As you can imagine, more than a dozen episodes here. So we've already got, if you just can't wait for that, be sure to look at our existing documentary, 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, in which we've also included 40 high-rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolition experts, all laying out this evidence for us. And the documentary, 15 minutes long, World Trade Center Building 7, narrated by actor Ed Asner. And he, in this documentary that we made, is very careful. Just in 15 minutes, you can get the essence of what happened at Building 7. But we also have, as we talked about last week's podcast on Building 7, the very special finite element analysis performed by the University of Alaska at Fairbanks, one of the top forensic structural engineers in the world, Professor Leroy Hulsey, who is featured in this documentary made by Dylan Avery. And all of this evidence is outlined in a brochure. It couldn't be easier. All of this is on our website, richardgage911.org. You can buy 100 of them for $50, or you can download and print it for free right on the website, from the website. Why is this so important? Well, we've spent $14 trillion on the longest war in U.S. history. We've killed well over 1 million people in Afghanistan and Iraq. 38 million people displaced in the ensuing global war on terror. And 37,000 U.S. soldiers killed. 4 times that many killed by their own hand later. Absolute tragedy 9/11 was. It's given us the invasions of these Middle Eastern countries, the goal of the Project for a New American Century from those neocons in that think tank that were brought in by the Bush administration to run all of this mayhem. The loss of our civil liberties through the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, in which any of us can be arrested without a right to a lawyer, a trial, a jury. We can be tortured. We can be assassinated even. And that's all, quote, legal. Now, that can happen. So the truth about 9/11 is very, very dark. Where do we draw our line in the sand? Really? I mean, how long do we wait? Do we wait for the next 9/11? I'll tell you, we've had 2 of them since 9/11. We've had COVID over the last 3 years with a false disease and the false solution to it, which is killing people on a massive scale. And we have Gaza on October 7th of 2023, which was an inside job, another false flag operation designed to eliminate the population from Gaza, which is happening with the destruction of 70% of the housing there, genocide by any definition. So when are you going to start speaking the truth about these false flag operations? We'll get to Gaza and we'll get to COVID in subsequent presentations here on the Brandenburg News Network. But look look what power you can have. You may feel like a millimeter or 2 millimeter size domino. What can I do? Well, watch what you can do.
Boom. That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building.
And that's what we're up against. The deep state is completely entrenched and bigger than we have ever imagined. But working together, sharing the information in podcasts like this and the other incredible podcasts that Donna has brought to your attention, you have immense power, because you can ask 2 people to share this with 2 other people who can share it with 2 other people. And all of a sudden, we're taking down the deep state. Look what happened, for instance, in the recent election. All of a sudden, the deep state is in a panic because we have used our power to move the needle in the right direction. Okay, some of us don't have complete faith in Trump, but do we have faith in some of his key appointments? Okay, so it's getting better, and we got to realize that we have our own personal power here for finding out who we really are. We discover that we're not trapped in the matrix with agents, demons, vampire energies, and the deep state. They are trapped in here with us. And working together, that's what we get. The takedown of the deep state. Ultimately, it's going to take work, right? Because we've been lackadaisical for what, 50 years more? Well, that's what I wanted to bring to the attention of our listeners today, Donna.
Well, that's wonderful. And I just, every time I talk with you, I feel like I learn things that I thought I knew the subject matter pretty well, but I'm learning something new every day, and just really, really amazed with, especially like the seismic information you brought forward today. And anytime that the universities are involved in anything, I have a lot of questions because the integrity is just not there. And I think that that's something that we need to really focus on, is the connection with our indoctrination camps in raising the next generation of non-critical thinkers who can be swayed on both sides of the argument. That's a huge concern of mine. They've been involved in so many things, and I have so many questions. I'm like a 5-year-old. I could sit here and pummel you with questions all day, but I really want to let some of this settle so that I can, go over this again. And all I can say is I'm very, very thankful and grateful for you and Gail, and for you coming on and bringing this technical information forward, because what I see in the narrative that's out there, the overall narrative, that if you're listening to mainstream media, okay, not like podcasts like this or alternative media, is that people are spinning things all the time, right? And I think it's so important, and it's on both sides. Fox News used to be regarded as reliable. Now most of the people I know on the conservative side just say Fox News is just complete crap, right? Because you can see them spinning things. So it's not just CNN. Even CNN is right occasionally, But the point being is that we have to listen to every bit of information that comes out on 9/11, because I think 9/11 is going to be it's going to be that stick or that card that gets pulled that brings the whole house of cards down, because so many different things are connected to it, and the amount of hiding, the amount of connected people is just incredible. I'm going to go back to the dancing Israelis that were dancing off to the side that came up, the Silverstein connection and the connection there. And also there's more connections that we can put together here, and a lot more questions that we need to ask. And I'm just really excited about it. And I'm excited about going through this on Thursdays with you, because I think that there's so much more information that needs to come out. And I really appreciate your technical expertise on this a lot.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, there's a few things that I've seen over the years that I have a lot of questions about, and you brought it up here, that there's probably more than one way that these buildings were brought down. Is that correct?
Not sure what you mean. We certainly have the evidence, forensic evidence of explosives, high energy explosives, and also thermite and also nanothermite, as we've discussed last week.
Is it possible that there was other methods that could have brought some of it down too, that would answer questions that other people have? Or is that something that you either don't have, haven't looked into, and you've stayed within this scope, or have you looked at some other things that people will allege that might have happened?
Yeah, I've looked at quite a few alternative hypotheses that have been brought up over the years, and I've had the opportunity, as we discussed halfway through this presentation, to just about readily dismiss directed energy weapons and nuclear weapons. But I'm not saying something is impossible. I'm just saying that we haven't seen credible evidence for it yet, other than what we presented in this series.
And I appreciate that, because I think that that's going to answer some people's questions, because of course the discussions have been provoked here, and so a lot of people are speaking up and saying, hey, what about directed energy weapons? What about this? What about that? What about that? And my answer to them was, I think that Richard is staying in his area of expertise, which he can absolutely provide the receipts on. Doesn't mean that there might be some more stuff outside of that, but what you're focusing on is the things that you can conclusively prove. And I kind of appreciate that approach, because I know that, say, like if we're trying to prove something in a court of law or bring charges against the people who perpetrated a crime, though there may be things outside of that, you want to stick to those things that will hold up in a court of law, so that when you do bring the hammer down on them, that it is within the scope. So, like, for example, we can go ahead and say that fraud was committed within the elections in the state of Michigan. And I believe that to be true, and that there was intentional fraud. But in a court of law, malfeasance and maladministration and some of those other charges are just bam. Those are so quick to be able to prove that you can go after the ones that perpetrated a crime. Doesn't mean that fraud isn't involved in this, but it's harder to prove the intention and such, or harder to prove some of those things like directed energy weapon. I've often had a question on there, and you had it in one of your videos. There's a piece of metal that's sticking up. There's like a girder sticking up, and all of a sudden it goes and it falls into dust.
Well, what it does, that specific set of interior core columns standing 1,000 feet in the air for 6 seconds after the tower has come down and blown out around it. Oh, it doesn't go. What it does, very carefully, we've analyzed this, it drops frame by frame through the concrete powder, which has been shaken off of it. It doesn't go poof into concrete powder or steel dust. It is clearly falling through that. So there's another explosive charge, which finally removes the base of it. Go ahead.
That's good to know, because I mean, I'm pretty open-minded on stuff. I'll consider everything, and that's the first time I've actually heard that explained, because And, most people that I've seen said, look, it's directed energy weapons that have brought it down, and that there's never been an opposing viewpoint, which to me is always concerning. You should have a little bit of push and pull where you finally go like this and you get to the truth. But just like with our elections, we have to take everybody's opinions and address them so that everybody's heard, and then bring the receipts. And that's the first time I've heard that. So I always appreciate people bringing things that we can consider and that we should be looking at. So, but I think that the actual proof of explosions is so compelling, and seen on the inside of the building. I mean, I've seen for years, because I'm totally 9/11 obsessed. Okay. And to see the fuses that were in the buildings, and boxes of fuses that were there, and the way that the building was shut down for, like, I think it was 3 months they were shut down, and there were vans bringing things into the building, but it was shut down during certain hours of the day. You should be asking a lot of questions on why. And I mean, not you, but everyone needs to be asking a lot of questions on why. And the ejection of the materials laterally is absolutely kind of like it's a clincher for me that there absolutely were explosions or explosions and charges that were planted in the building to bring these buildings down,
and all of which is denied by the directed energy weapons proponents. By the way, they say there were no explosions. They say there was no extreme heat. Well, we spent 30 minutes looking at evidence, lots of different points of evidence for extreme heat. They suggest that the beams were softened, and by the directed energy weapons, and that caused a collapse. Well, that would have been an organic collapse, not an upward, outward volcanic eruption, as you're pointing to. Also, they suggest that the steel was dustified, which is a contradiction to the weakening of the steel by directed energy weapons. But anyway, then if that was true, where would all of the where that steel dust would fall in with the rest of the dust, right? Which was rigorously analyzed by numerous different agencies, which don't find any steel dust in the World Trade Center dust, right? None. What do they find? They find evidence of thermite incendiaries, which can only be the previously molten iron microspheres comprising up to 4 tons of all of this dust. So all of this evidence is ignored and twisted by the chief proponents of the directed energy weapons theory.
I think it's all good to cover, and I think it's really good for everybody to have their points of view talked about, because it is in everything that we are dealing with right now that we're going to have to listen to all sides and then have the evidence provided so that we can know what really happened. Because I still believe that 9/11, we get to the bottom of this and who was involved in taking these towers down. When you see the weirdness that President Bush had in that school where he started doing, the words and I pet goat and something, you can see that the powers that be brought these towers down, and it wasn't two lower level pilots that couldn't even hardly fly a Cessna and make a perfect corkscrew turn into the buildings. It is absurd. And the claims that we're going out there immediately, the finding their passports and like a whole city worth of dust and paper, it's absurd. It's totally absurd. And I think that this is as you said, it was to start the conflicts in the Middle East. And surprisingly, the question isn't who it brought into the fight. It's who it didn't bring into the fight in the Middle East is where we really should be looking. When you're looking at like spaces as a I don't know, an architect, for example, you're not looking at just the positive spaces. You're looking at the negative spaces and what's going on there. And I understand that. Okay. And I think that we should be looking at not only the positive spaces, but the negative spaces on who this conflict was brought to and why they weren't involved in the conflict. Why did they go to Afghanistan? Why did they go to Iraq? Why did they go to these areas? And why did they specifically leave out other areas in the conflict. What were they after, or what were they trying to destroy, or what chaos was involved in being created in those areas?
And interestingly, that is the subject we're diving into next week on this podcast with
well, that's good that I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah, the parallels between 9/11 and Gaza, the strategic policy of Israel and United States are interlinked, and not in a good way.
Well, I got to say something, and I'm going to bring this up, and I know I'm going to make a bunch of people either love me or hate me right now, but I don't care. I really don't care what your opinion is of me, because, this is my country too, and I want to get to the bottom of this, because there's too much that we don't know. And honestly, I'm looking at President Trump's appointments, because when I believe that he is the greatest president that the United States of America has ever had. With that said, his appointments and his endorsements, in my opinion, have pretty much sucked. Okay, with the exception of a few of them. So you have to look at them not at face value, but what are they accomplishing? And I think that President Trump is incredibly smart and brings things to the forefront, not for face value, but to direct our attention. And so I have to go back to the art of war. We're bringing down a how many 1,000-year death cult that has been honestly like invading our spaces from top to bottom. And you don't just bring something like that down in one shot, but we're going to have to ask some questions. Now, I want everybody to watch this. This is Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense. And he's telling a Jewish group about anyone who wants to talk about dual loyalty is dead wrong. Zionism and Americanism are intertwined. So watch this a minute, and I think this is going to bring it to the forefront.
Anyone that wants to take the stage and talk about dual loyalty is dead wrong. What this organization represents, what Western civilization represents today, is an understanding that Zionism and Americanism are the front lines of Western civilization and freedom in our world today. And what better time for that relationship? From the scrapping of the terrible Iran deal to the embassy move, the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish state, and the recognition of the Golan Heights. This president is a true friend of the state of Israel. It is an eternal bond, an unbreakable bond that represents faith and freedom and fidelity to historic, religious, and cultural traditions, the opposite of secularism and Islamism and anti-Semitism. I don't want to be Jeb Bush, but it's okay to clap. Just kidding.
So with that said, I think we have a lot of questions to ask here, and things are never what they appear. I do believe that President Trump is working on a whole nother level on the art of war here, and keeping our enemies closer as part of that deal, and talking to them and such. And so right now I'm kind of watching everything with it just kind of like, well, let's just wait and see. I love Tom Holman. I know him as the border czar. He's going to get down there and things are going to get real quick. And I thought he was an outstanding pick. But some of these other people he's picked, I'm sitting here watching and going, this is interesting. When you have, some of the PACs and such that unite them, and the big money donors and such, I think we need to be watching this. And I think we're going to find out that there's a lot connected with this globalist structure. Now, with that said, I absolutely stand with the Chinese people, the Jewish people, the people of this world. I stand with the people as God's creation. But I'm going to tell you what, we the people are at war with a global evil entity that is so far above what we think of as nation states that they have obscured the line. Like, I believe when they say China, we're not talking about a geographic China or the Chinese people. We're talking about an organization that's linked with our own government and our intelligence organizations, as well as the global bankers and such, and that it's above what we think is nation states. And so we have to be very careful on defining who we're talking about, because I'm not anti-Semitic at all. I have lots of friends who are Jewish, and I also have friends who are Arab and Muslim and that sort of thing. And there's no craziness going on there that of the people that I know, but it sure is coming from these proxy countries that the globalists are operating in. And when I see Ukraine is a proxy country of our intelligence organizations, and you can lob that in with Mossad and GCHQ, the British intelligence organization, and that sort of thing. They're all linked in together, and they are all working with a globalist agenda. And we can see that across the world. So our enemies are not the people. And I want to make that clear to everyone out there, that when we're talking these things, it's not like grab your torches and pitchforks. Don't, the people that are that are trying to get to the bottom of all of this stuff in different areas. We are not at war with each other. We are at war with a global power that wants to enslave this entirety of this world. And we need to stand together, because when you look at what communists and Marxists do, which is truly a death cult, it's a satanic death cult at its core. When you look at how they operate, that's what we're warring against right now. It is not the people. We stand together, united. And I think that we're going to get into this a little bit more, and how they have utilized all of these structures to make us fight against each other, so that we can't recognize or fight them. With how we started this off with FEMA invading the state of Michigan and that Wurtsmith Air Force Base that they have taken. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not buying this bullshit, and I'm just not going to buy it right now, because it looks to me to be a huge distraction, and there's something else going on there. I don't know what that is right now, but I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to dig till I find out, and we're going to continue to bring the truth to Brandenburg News Network, whether you like me or anyone here or not. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Matters nada to me. We need to have these discussions, because the powers that be that are out here to absolutely destroy all of us, they're not after just President Trump, which they were clearly after. They're not after the United States of America as it stands. It is after we the people. And when we look at the people globally who have been killed in these conflicts, it's across the entire world that this virus has crept in, and to destroy people. And we're going to go back to the what's operational. We've got the World Economic Forum that they were bringing to Detroit here, and that's through Whitmer. And Whitmer, Soros puppet Whitmer and such that we have here, but also look at what's going over there in Israel and the Palestinians. And we're going to talk about this Ben Gurion Canal, continue to talk about this. And we have to talk about these structures that are uncomfortable, and not try to protect protected classes of citizens, but look at the evidence that is out there in all forms, whether because I know that there's directed energy people, there's in all things, you've got directed energy people, you've got explosion people, you've got this, that, and the other thing. I don't care about the groups you're involved in. We're going to have to look at all the evidence-based, and what happened in order to get to the truth, because some of this is being programmed in on both sides, and in order to keep us divided and fighting. I think we should have an honest discussion about this, and not go into crazy world in defending our territory, but bring the receipts, and let's look at who's behind these receipts to destroy the narrative that's here to keep us divided, stupid sheep running around and running right to our own demise. So, and that means we got to stand together on the basis of the truth. And that truth is got to be under God. And I firmly believe that. And I just really appreciate, you and everyone else that has the guts to step forward, to challenge the narrative, to bring uncomfortable subjects forward, and and be willing to be attacked personally on bringing the truth forward in order to get to the ultimate truth. This is the house of cards that brings the entire thing down. All points will converge on 9/11. All points do. All the players there were sitting at the table on 9/11, on the attack on American soil. All of them were. So, and we're going to continue to challenge that, to knit this thing all together and bring the whole damn thing down, because we have to do that, and prosecute the ones that were involved. To the Democrats, George Bush was involved. There's no two ways about it that he was involved behind this. And so you can say that for people that want to say, oh, it was the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's this, it's that, the other thing, they were all sitting at the table, all of them. Deep state actors that had invaded into every single nook and cranny of what holds America together, and where America goes, the world goes right now. So I'm not willing to hold on to castles built in my mind or the way I think it went. I'm willing to look at everything and try to be objective and open-minded to find out. We might find out that there's something else crawling in from the shadows that was a bigger player than what we ever imagined. And so in order to find the truth, we're going to have to let go of some of those castles we've built in our mind and find out who actually was responsible for this attack on American soil. It's probably one of the most important investigations we will ever go through, ever. It knits everything together. So with that said, I hope that also resonates with the directed energy weapon people, because I am open to that. I am very open to directed energy weapons. I think it's highly possible that there was more than one way that they attacked the towers. I think it's highly possible. And I think we need to explore that to just make sure we settle all questions. It's like the elections. There wasn't one way they cheated the elections. There's hundreds of ways that they cheated these elections. And so to point at one thing like the voter rolls or the machines, which the machines were definitely behind it, but that wasn't it. We have to have a thorough landscape so that we can bring all the players that were cheating in 100 different ways down and prosecute them all. And so until we get to the bottom of it, we're going to continue to go down that. And I am willing to listen to each and every one of you in order to bring the truth forward, and but also ask you to consider what those things that are outside of the areas that you have been focusing on, because it may be a combination of all of them. And I think that that's something that is that we have to chase down. So anyhow, thank you so much. Let's end this with a prayer. Would you like to pray, or would you like me to?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you wanting to know the truth in all things, because we know that the truth is found entirely in you. You've got the vantage point. You can see exactly what's going on from every angle and every perspective out there. You know what happened. And this is not going to go unpunished, the direct attack on the United States of America. It's going to be punished, and your justice is going to come down on us at some point in time. And we have total faith that you will lead us through this. And also the aftermath that happened with the Patriot Act and the traitors that are within our own government that refuse to make sure that this is investigated, the traitors that hid what happened on J6, the Fedsurrection, the traitors that happened with the nonsense that killed millions of people through COVID, the vaccine, all of this is coming forward. And we know we want the truth, wherever it may lead, we want the truth. And we know that you know the truth, and that you will in fact lead us through that. Help us to stand strong, and that it's your strength that comes through it, the absolute truth, the healing that will come after, after we have all of our questions answered, the elections and the stuff that's gone there. We live in a world that is highly deceptive, and it's bombarding us like we're in a ball crawl of information, hitting us with from every side, from different people who are in there that are just rearranging things constantly. And we know, however, at the end of the day, that you're with us. You will never leave us nor forsake us, and that your precious Son, Jesus Christ, came to right this world as a savior of this world, and each and every one of us individually. And we thank you so very much for everything you've done. We accept your gift of salvation. We accept that you love us and that you want to be with us, and that there is never anything that's going to separate us from your love. All we got to do is turn towards you, and that you'll never leave nor abandon us. And you know what? Our stability comes from you in all situations. We can go look at this and go, well, this world is temporary. We knew it from the beginning. If we didn't, we weren't paying attention. And that you have given us all the answers, and that someday we will be with you in glory. But while we're here doing your work on this earth, which is your creation, your sandbox. You make the rules here, but we're here to do your work and see that your will is done. Work towards that end on earth as it is in heaven. Whether we see that day or not, as Abraham did, he believed that you were going to give the land to his descendants, and we believe that you are going to see through, and that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and we will work towards that end, unwavering. Thank you so much for everything. We love you, and I ask for your favor upon everyone who is listening to this, and give everyone peace, knowing that this is a process. You cannot fix things when people have philosophical differences on things, but we must sit down and talk in a civil way, and with deep respect for each other, not letting them divide us, but standing together as one nation under you. And we're so thankful for you. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray, amen. There we go. So here you go, boys and girls. We go to that part of the show. Go to bing, 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 BrandenburgForGovernor.com, because I'm the best non-conceder who has ever not conceded in the history of the United States of America. And I want to have a discussion with the real president, the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, in cowboy boots, about this. So someday that's going to happen. So, but at any rate, God bless you all, and God bless all those whom you love, and God bless America. Make it a great day. You know, the way we do that is mental toughness and strength of heart, where we don't let things discourage us or make us crazy. Don't go crazy land on everybody, because we have the law on our side, and we have God on our side. That's really all we need. So have a wonderful day. I will be on tomorrow with another tough topic, health and freedom in America. And this is kind of going to probably tie back into the same bad actors that probably had a hand in 9/11. So we're going to continue to uncover and see what this little global death cult crime syndicate has been doing to our world, unwavering. Thank you for being on today, Richard. Stay on. I'm going to end the broadcast, and we will see you tomorrow.